Hi guys, so today we're going to start talking about perception. So sensation is the first half. Sensation is anytime you have a receptor that is activated by some type of physical stimulus, whether that physical stimulus be light energy, sound waves, touch, chemicals in the air, anything like that. So today we're going to start taking a look at the second half of this, which is perception. So with perception, we have ways in which we organize the things that we perceive. So one of the overall encompassing concepts in psychology is this principle of Gestalt. Gestalt simply means that the sum is greater than the whole, or that the sum is greater than the individual pieces. So that you take bits and pieces of information and you transform it into something that is more than just those bits and pieces of information. It's some type of whole that is all-encompassing. And there are a couple different Gestalt principles that we can apply here when it comes to perception. The first one is proximity. When things are close together, we view them as a group. And you'll see on the next slide, I have examples of these because the visualization sometimes helps to clarify any questions. The second one is continuity, which is also known as good continuation. Those are the same thing. We have a tendency to see continuous patterns, not disrupted ones. Again, on the next page, I'll go over this a little bit more. Similarity, similar objects are seen as being a group. And finally, closure, we fill in the gaps. So if we look at this over here, proximity, rather than seeing this as 8 circles, we usually see it as 2 groups of or 4 groups of 2 circles apiece. Why? Because these circles are in close proximity to one another. We also have a tendency to group based on similarity. We see it as a group of dark circles, white circles, dark circles, white circles. Closure, when asked what we see here, most of us aren't going to say that we see 4 sets of brackets. We're going to say that we see 4 cubes. Like we, in our minds, kind of close in these gaps here. Good continuation or continuity, we see these lines as being continuous, not separate from one another. And then common region, so this kind of, it's sort of the same as proximity, so we will see this, as being a grouping of a black and white, a white and black, a black and white, okay? So when it comes to perception, we know that it's at least in part learned. You have to be actively involved in the environment in order to perceive things the way that others do. And what's interesting is sometimes, in a very few rare instances, there are individuals who are born blind and who can later have their sight restored. Those individuals, initially anyway, cannot tell the difference between a circle and a square. To them, they look the same. You have to be actively involved in the environment to really learn the difference. That's why when little kids are given those shape cubes, and they're, constantly trying to put the square in the circle or the heart in the star, it's not that they are dumb, if you will. It's that they have not yet learned the difference. You have to be actively involved in the environment in order to learn those key differences. We also know that perception is influenced by our needs, beliefs, and expectations. So let's say that I ask you to go out and lay down on the grass and look up into the clouds and tell me what you see, right? And some of you might see a boat, some of you might see a unicorn, some of you might see, an upside down helicopter or something like that. If, however, I locked you in your room and didn't feed you for the next week, and then asked you to go outside and lay down and tell me what you see in the clouds, inevitably you would probably see food. Why? Because at that moment, you are consumed with the idea that you are hungry. And so your expectations and your needs influence what you see and what you hear and what you smell and what you taste, etc. That's why, like earlier, whenever we talked about the restaurant that serves everyone in the dark, people said they were willing to try things that under normal circumstances, if they could see it, they wouldn't be willing to try. We also know that, that's called your perceptual set. Your needs, beliefs, and expectations are called your perceptual set. We also know that we infer things. This is called perceptual inference. We fill in the gap with what our senses tell us based upon past experience. So when I come home, as soon as I open my garage door, I hear meow coming from the basement, right? My past experience tells me that meow equals a cat. So when I open up my basement door, I expect to see a cat, not like, an elephant. Past experience also tells me that it's going to be my cat that I see whenever I open up the basement door. The same thing if you're selling something door to door and you knock on someone's door and you hear like woof, 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 woof from behind the door, you make an assumption that that's like a dog, right? And you also probably make an assumption about the size of the dog based on the caliber of the bark. If it's a woof, 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 you think it's a small dog. If it's a woof, you think it's a big dog, right? That's perceptual inference. Okay. So one of the really cool things about perception is called figure ground perception. And that's our ability to discriminate between a figure and its background. And sometimes it's pretty obvious. Like right now it's pretty obvious that there's white words on a black background, right? The white words are the figure, the black is the background. However, that's not always the case. Sometimes we can perceive a single pattern in more than one way. We associate this with our sense of vision and our sense of hearing. If you are focused on what your friend is talking about in the cafeteria and all the other noise is the background, you have made what your friend is telling you the figure and everything else the background. If, however, you catch like a little piece, a little juicy nugget coming from behind you and you decide you're going to start listening in on that conversation, now you've changed. Now the conversation behind you is the figure and everything else is the background. We can really demonstrate this visually with a couple really key examples here. So if you take a look at this example, if you make the faces the figure, it looks like a bunch of different faces from all around the world. If, however, you make the white space the figure and the faces the background, you see that this spells Google, Google. Google did this on like People of the World Day or something like that. So one of the most famous examples of figure ground is FedEx. Like if you look at the FedEx logo, the white space in between the D and the E is an arrow, which is supposed to signify like going on the move. For this one, you can see either like two elderly people, this is an old man, this is an old woman, kind of gazing at one another lovingly, I would assume, or you can see a Mexican street scene. So you have like, the gentleman's eye becomes a man in a hat playing guitar. You have this gentleman over here with plates stacked up on his head. His ear becomes a woman, like kind of leaning against the door frame. And then this becomes like a vase. The next one, take a look at it here. And you can see that this is either like a nature scene, a little butterfly with some flowers and plants growing, or it is a woman's face. This becomes her eye, this becomes her eyebrow, here's the outline of her face, her nose, her mouth. It shouldn't be surprising that we see faces more readily than anything else. We're kind of programmed to see faces because faces are what we usually associate with people and identification. With this one, again, if you make the white space the foreground, it's a face. The eyes become the black spots become the eyes. This becomes like her nose, a mouth. Or if you make the black the foreground, it becomes a gentleman playing a saxophone. In particular, this is Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton was running for president, it was, kind of a big thing that he played the saxophone and made him hip, cool, whatever you want to call it. For this one, it is either a woman kind of walking out of the woods towards a small city, or you can see a man's face here. Specifically, it is George Washington's face, and this is like Washington, D.C. in its very beginnings. Here's one of Washington's eyes, here's another eye, his nose, and his mouth. I love this one. I feel like this was definitely made by someone who had been scorned. It's either the word liar written kind of on an angle in cursive, or it becomes a man's face. Clearly, whomever made this did not feel as though this individual told the truth. This becomes like his eyes, nose, mouth, chin, neck. This one, take a moment and see how many faces you can count. And generally, the longer you look at it, the more faces you see. So this one has 11 faces. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And it is a family tree because if you notice, the faces on the bottom are younger, and as you go up the tree, it continues to get older. So again, that one's kind of cool. This one, you see either Albert Einstein, pretty famous individual in history, or if you look closer, it becomes sort of like a weird, I don't know, Roman bathhouse scene or something. You have 3 ladies here, with their arms kind of wrapped around one another, and she's sitting on a stool, which is also his mustache, and this is like a brick wall instead of his forehead. This one, you can either see like a flower, or you see 2 individuals embracing and kissing in here. These flower petals become her stockings, and these petals down here are her shoes. This one's always fun too. So this one, you either see like 2 individuals kind of staring out across the lake, or you see a baby, specifically a baby in the womb. Like here is the outline of the baby's face. Here's the baby's arms, baby's legs. It's in the fetal position down here. And this becomes like the umbilical cord and placenta. And then finally, this one's the hardest one. So initially, most people see a frog. If, however, you turn it sideways, like 90 degrees sideways, it becomes a horse. This becomes the horse's nostrils. This is the horse's eye. This is the horse's ear that's closest towards you. This is the ear that's furthest away. It's sort of like a profile shot of a horse. Again, just a way to demonstrate that we can sometimes see and therefore perceive things in 2 different manners. Okay, so that's it for today's lesson. Be on the lookout for some things that, are figure ground. If you're getting any packages from Amazon in the mail, Amazon has a little bit of figure ground going on there. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up here in the next couple of lessons. I hope you all are doing well, and I will talk to you later.